I wanted to share some thoughts with you from Acts chapter 27, which has been much on my heart recently. I know a lot of people have struggled through the last 6 months, and the thought that this might be stretching out for 6 or 9 months more has really hit people hard. Acts chapter 27 tells the story of the Apostle Paul and Luke, his travelling companion, going to Rome in a ship, and the storms that they go through and the shipwreck that they suffer. And I just wanted to pick a few things out because I think it speaks to us about going through a really difficult time like this. As we are reading through this passage, Luke is very personal and records his own personal testimony, not just talking about what happened to Paul, but he was very much there himself. And he uses words like this: the winds were against us. We made slow progress. Sailing had become dangerous. And it says that the Apostle Paul knew that problems were ahead. And so he spoke to those in charge, the centurion and the owner of the ship. But the centurion didn't take his advice. And so wrong decisions were being made and peril lay ahead. As they carried on, it says, we thought we'd obtained what we wanted. Maybe there was a bit of a false dawn in a change in the weather. And you might be feeling like that now. People who are thinking, well, we can get through this and then in the autumn it will start to relax. Well, sometimes a false dawn really throws you back onto yourself and you end up feeling particularly discouraged. What happens here is they go into an even stronger experience of storm. We were caught by the storm, we were driven along, we took a violent battering, and then all the way down to verse 20 it says, we finally gave up all hope of being saved. And I wanted to look briefly at what the Apostle Paul says, because at that point he speaks to the men on the ship, and the first thing he says is, keep up your courage. I want to say that to you today. Keep up your courage, and let's encourage each other. These are difficult days, but keep courage up. God is still in charge. And that's the second thing, because Paul says, I have been told by God that not a single life will be lost, but the ship will be destroyed. And there's a couple of things there. The first thing is God's plan and purpose is still going ahead. An angel appears to Paul and says, you are going to carry the gospel to Caesar. You are going to go before kings and princes and fulfill the prophecy that's been over your life since Acts chapter 9. But the ship is going to be destroyed. There's going to be rough seas ahead on this journey. And very practically, the Apostle Paul in the rest of the chapter gives 4 things that we might do to position ourselves to continue to believe that God is going to work his purpose out, but to deal with the hardships that lie ahead. The first is that he refuses to escape. He refuses to quit. What they actually do is they cut adrift the life rafts so that none of the sailors can get overboard and just try something else. Stick with the plan. Follow the call of God on your life. Believe that he still has a plan and a purpose for you, and don't look at escape. The second is that we need to eat to survive. It says in verse 33, just before dawn, Paul urged them all to eat. For the last 14 days, he said. We might think in our context, for the last 6 months. Paul says, for the last 14 days, you have been in constant suspense and you've gone without food. You haven't eaten anything. Now I urge you to take some food. You need it to survive. Let's just take that in an obvious spiritual way. As we go through these days, you've got to feed yourself to survive. Feed yourself on the Word of God. Feed yourself in worship, in prayer. Feed yourself in fellowship as you're able to do. Not just encourage each other, but encourage yourself in the Lord. Feed yourself if you're going to survive. Look to your own personal spiritual rhythms and make sure that you're spending time with God. The third thing is, well, it says that after they'd eaten, they were all encouraged, and after they'd eaten as much as they wanted, they lightened the ship by throwing the grain into the sea. And I want to say that to you as well. During this time, lighten the load. There may be that there are things that you're carrying which can just be thrown over because they're not life-giving in this season. Maybe you can cut out some stuff in your life. Maybe there's stuff that's been on you as an expectation or expectations that you've put onto yourself, and they're just not appropriate for the moment that we're in. So lighten the load and throw away what you don't need. It may well be that actually coming out of this time, that's one of the most helpful things you can do. You can embrace a new pattern because you've thrown away the things that are no longer life-giving. Perhaps they belong to the past and not to the future. And then finally, about that future, it says in verse 39, when daylight came, and be encouraged because daylight will come. There is something on the other side of this storm. After all of the pandemic restrictions, there will be a time when it's in the past and we're able to go into the future. But look what it says here. When daylight came, they did not recognize the land, but they saw a bay with a sandy beach. And I think that's going to be the same for us. On the other side of the storm that we're in, we may not recognize the land. You may not recognize what your ministry looks like. You may not recognize what the church looks like. We may not recognize what society looks like. But there'll still be something that we'll see and we'll recognize that that's the way to go forward. They didn't recognize the land, but they saw a bay with a sandy beach. And that was the thing that God wanted them to do next. And so those four things, don't think about escaping, don't jump ship, stick with the plan because God is working his purposes out, even in the middle of this storm. Eat to survive, lighten the load, and be prepared that we're going to be in strange lands, but there will still be a next step for us to take. That really spoke to me. Acts 27, I hope it speaks to you as well. Thank you for all you're doing. Keep connected, be part of your network, join with others, and look online for all the resources that we're producing in New Wine. I'm praying for you, and I pray that God would really bless you as you bless and serve others.